Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growth Signal. I'm Alyssa Nolte,
I am Bob London.
and we are going to have a great conversation today about the future of customer relationships. So let's get right into it. Bob, what is your hot take?
AI is more empathetic and more patient and a better listener than humans in a consistent way.
Okay, that is a hot take. Tell me more.
There are studies and so first of all, I should say I'm in the business of teaching people how to have more revealing human conversations. So it's not necessarily in my best interest to have that hot take. But I think so there are studies. One is I'll point people, or we can point people to an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about how Allstate Insurance compared the emails sent by AI agents and the interactions that had with customers versus the human emails and interactions, and found that the AI agents were more patient, more kind, more helpful, um, and ultimately delivered more satisfying outcomes than the human interactions. So that's one of many. And I can talk a lot more about this. I am studying it a lot, but it is, I think the reason it maybe qualifies as a hot take is because everyone who's going to be listening to this podcast presumably is a human. They
Yeah.
have they have feelings and they have jobs, and that they have instinctively. I just had this conversation with my wife last night. Instinctively don't perhaps want to instinctively want to believe that there are certain things that humans do really well that machines can't replace.
Right.
I That's true. However, when you try to scale something like understanding customers, it's very hard to do that if the humans are all over the map in terms of how they engage with customers.
Well, in the interpretation of it, right? I just had a conversation with someone yesterday and we talked about how we as human beings are primarily emotional, irrational creatures. And then we like to wrap our decisions that we made emotionally in logic and pretend like we rationalize them and we had a logical outcome. And so that initially when you said that, that was like, no, no, it can't possibly be true that
Yeah.
a machine can be more human, empathetic, and like kind. But it does make sense because a machine can't get, pissed off when I'm like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated by this. Or a machine is not going to be annoyed by a constant bombardment of messages in a chat space.
Yes. So you said it better than I did. I'll go a little further and say machines don't have a bad day. They don't have uh the childcare wasn't open when they dropped their kid off and they were late to work. They don't have things. I'll just call
Right.
it.
Right.
And
And that makes total sense.
yeah, and this is going to tie directly to perhaps later in the conversation, action items or next steps or calls to action, which I don't need to get into now because you'll ask me later, but it's definitely relate. And look, I'm in the last quartile quadrant of my career and I'm more excited than ever, but also I'm excited because I got alarmed about some of the trends and decided not to be the old guy who said, nah, I'll just retire and not have to worry about any of this stuff. But it's and so I'm as I leaned into all this stuff regarding AI, I got very excited because it addresses what my clients ask for, which is how do we do customer listening at scale in an effective way. So I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, and the hard part about AI, right, is it's only as good as the training and the parameters and the barriers that you've put on it, right? So you do have to figure out, or at least I guess I should say, at this time of its development, it's only as good as the barriers you put on it.
No, it's
So how do we create an AI that is useful, intelligent, empathetic, outcome oriented? Because I've talked to some chatbots that I'm like, I just need to talk to a human. I have an issue. I know it's going to be an escalation. It's like an emergency situation. And it's just back and forth with unhelpful articles
yeah.
that didn't really tell me anything. So, like, that isn't a great experience. So, how do we get to that point where people can actually have great conversations with their AIs, with their chatbots, and get useful, empathetic experiences?
Right. That's a great question. And I think I do hear this a lot that we are bringing our consumer experiences to this dialogue. and we're saying, okay, so you're saying that I'm going to have the same experience with my B2B vendor that I'm having with my cable company. Well, that sucks.
Right.
Uh, or
Don't
the,
sign me up for that. No, thank you.
yeah, or my credit card company. I I I'm examining a little bit of a different perspective, which is how to. So what I do is try to get help people get customers to open up about what's most important to them. And I'm looking at how AI can help augment that in two ways. One is to be sort of an AI enabled coach, to help people prepare for calls in a better way. And the way you do that is you train the coach on the methodology, which I have. And the other is to have train an agent to conduct these feedback conversations at scale, and not to replace humans that are, let's call them, sort of high touch customers that have CSMs, or account managers, but to get feedback at scale from the customers you don't normally hear from and don't normally reach out to. And it's better than a survey because the customer is interacting with their voice, so they don't have to fill out a form. So those are the two areas I'm focused on. And in both instances, it comes back to answer your question, you have to train it to to follow a methodology that asks customer focused questions, not vendor focused questions.
Yes.
They call them you questions, not me. A me question is, are we adding value? Would you renew today if the renewal was today? Those are me questions. A you question is, if I could sneak into your next board meeting, what do you think I would hear as the biggest challenge or priority that the company is dealing with? And that's when customers engage. So if you train the agent or the coach to think that way, that's where all the value starts to happen. And I'm kind of living this in real time, giving my experiences as on the fly here as I'm doing these things with AI.
I like those 2 questions. I wanna double click into both of those. Maybe this is my hot take, but I feel like value is an unquantifiable feeling that people have,
Of course it
and
is.
when you ask them, like, "Are you getting value?" That's not something that you can just, like, put into a dashboard. It's a
You're
feeling.
you're 100% right. It's a perception, it's subjective, and that's why I teach people not to ask it. And I don't
Yeah.
say don't ask what keeps you up at night, because that's also a cliche that customers understand is quickly followed by, "Oh, well, let me pounce on your answer." To
Let me write up a contract to solve that for you.
yes, to pivot back to me
Yeah,
instead of staying with you. Then customers know when they hear that question that they sort of now they glaze over and they might give a cliche answer.
yeah. So, the other thing I wanna present to you and get your feedback on, I was on a call with someone a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "Hey, I'm sending my customer all of these things, these really valuable support items, and they're not opening them." And my reaction to her was like, "Babe, you don't get to define what the customer finds valuable. Like, if they're not opening your stuff, it's not valuable, and just
Okay.
calling it valuable doesn't make it valuable."
A
So,
thousand
how do go ahead.
percent. 1,000%. I agree with you. I
So
mean,
how do we start to change people's perceptions of me things, right? Like, "Oh, I find this valuable, so therefore you will find this valuable." How do we change that mindset to say, "We need to have you questions, not me questions?"
I'm trying to attack this one company at a time when I engage with companies, that they're I'm trying to make the world a little bit better place for customers in that sense. Because customers will talk 70% of the time and engage fully and lean in if you start the conversation by asking about their business and their job instead of starting with slides about what we think is important. And I think it goes back to there's a very top down, also a very sort of technology driven sort of wave that just says, like, we need to push our message out there a lot. And whoever did the diligence on whether that message and those metrics are what customers are interested in. So I'm talking about taking it. What I try to teach people is before you sign customers up for 4 QBRs, like, hey, you bought our software, we're going to throw in 4 amazing 1 hour meetings that are all about us. Let's not do that. Let's start with a meeting. I jokingly one day called it a UBR, where the U stands for you, the customer, because let's just not assume that the sales that sales process uncovered real insights when they were doing discovery, because those aren't generally insights about whether they're going to buy or not what
Yeah.
other outcomes that they need. So let's go back and have a step back conversation. I think CS is uniquely and particularly qualified to do that because they're not known for pouncing on every objection and every opportunity immediately. They're good, generally generous, thoughtful people that want to help. And so they have that trust factor, and just say like, the best outcome for us is for you to use us forever and ever. And in order to do that, we can only get there if we understand why is this important to your company, and why is this important to you and your role, and how do we connect the dots between the company, your role, and our value. And that you're creating a safe, comfortable space for the customer to open up about what's important to them. And then it may turn out that they do need those stats. I just finished an engagement this week, or I started an engagement this week where, so it's kind of interesting when I do training for teams, I pre-record a conversation, an interview with one of their customers in advance, and then I play the clips of that conversation to show how my methodology works. And the customer said, one of the questions I ask is, "Hey, if your superior was in this call or knew we were talking, well, this is my client's customer I'm speaking with. What would she or they say that they want me to know, or what would they ask?" And he said, I think it's really as simple as when she's in a leadership meeting at her level and above, and she gets asked a question, she needs data that she can put on the table, even if she's not asked, that she can offer up that informs the way people think and make decisions in that meeting. And the platform, meaning my client, that platform that we're using, we need to be able to get that data instantly in a form
Yeah.
that's useful to us, in a form that is clear and compelling and immediate. And I'm not going to share whether they were able to get that data that way or not. Point is, he gave the roadmap for value, to
Yeah.
go back to the word that we hate. It's a consulting slash vendor word, but he brought it to life. What is value? It's for my boss to be able to be successful in meetings by having real insights that come from this platform. And there it is. That's the roadmap to success. Um, so it doesn't matter how many times they log into the software, it's what comes out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. A hundred
That
percent.
making sense to you?
100%. And the hard part that I'm struggling with right now is like this everything you're saying seems obvious. So why is it something that you have to teach people? Right? Like why is it not just the standard?
Because it's not how companies think from the top down. Uh, mo- okay, I'll just say it this way. I would argue that the most successful companies in the world do it in the right order. They don't start with their solution. They start with what's the customer's company trying to accomplish? How do we fit into that? And how does the person we're dealing with fit into it? That's what creates sticky products, long-term relationships. If you position your solution simply to address the person sitting in front of you, that person may move on. And then you have to go back and recalibrate the whole value equation. But most companies, I'm sorry to say, most companies think that they've solved the product market fit and the go to market and the messaging, and they triple down on that before they really truly have connected with something in the customer that is logical and emotional, that solves a real business problem. And they end up loading up I'll just pick on this one thing. Like they load up the AI SDR with a little mini value prop,
Yep.
and they throw in a few things that they've scraped off of the internet. Like, "Hey, Bob London, congratulations on becoming a consultant recently after leaving the corporate world." That happened 20 years ago.
Yep.
Uh, Maybe you'd be interested in this outsourced IT service. And I'm like, "No, I'm a one-person shop, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
bother." So, you know, I I think you understand where I'm coming from, but it's a very top-down sort of go-to-market noise-making machine, as opposed to, I would argue that that's probably 98% of the budget goes into making noise, versus 2% might be giving lip service to listening to the customer. And all I'm saying is, let's make the 2% maybe 5% and move it to the beginning. Sort of like when you sit down with a customer, that little discussion slash questions slide at the end. move it to the beginning,
Yeah.
literally or metaphorically, and just say, like, before we start, we would love to ask a few big picture questions about how things are going in your world, your company, your job. And then that'll help you tune the talk track and the slides to what is important to them.
I'm on a big, what I'll call main character kick right now. Like that's what I'm trying to work through in my own content and intellectual property. But I think we as businesses and business leaders forget that we are the main characters of our own story, and our customers and our employees and our competitors are the main characters of their own story. And imposing our own like storyline on someone else just ends up with them being frustrated with that experience. So how do you take yourself out of the story and make sure you're paying attention to that main character, not your own main character?
You have to retrain your brain. You have to flip the
Yeah.
conversation somehow. You have to grab a hold of an approach or a methodology that reverses the thought process. I mean, it's as simple as like, I mean, it might take 30 seconds. Just I always call it start with a quiet mind when you're meeting with a customer, and don't think of them as your customer. Think of them as a human being. This is just one of many tips, techniques. They are a human being trying to just get their job done, feel good about it, feel successful, contribute something to the company. The only reason they're getting paid, this six-figure income that your customer makes or whatever they make is because the company is expecting something from them. What is
Yeah.
that? How are you helping them connect the dots? Just think about that for 30 seconds and center around that instead of, I have to get through this meeting with my agenda, my points. I have to get the customer to agree to these two or three things. I have to get them to nod their heads so that I can mark them down as green or greenish yellow instead of something else.
Yeah.
And that's that approach needs to change. And the other thing I would say is ask a question, preferably a question they've never been asked before, which I'm happy to share more of, and hit your own mute button. It's
Yes.
free. It's right there on your keyboard or your screen, and it is the best self-editing tool in the world. Because if you think to shift the conversation back to the vendor speak point of view, you have to intentionally unmute. And during that time of unmuting, it's a reminder for you to say, like, do I really need to do this right now? Or is my customer trying to tell me something that's important to them? So those are techniques that work really well.
That's really, really smart. We kind of talked about that most of the business world is unfortunately doing this the wrong way. A lot of our listeners on this podcast are leaders, business owners, people who are in positions to move things in the right direction.
Good.
So if someone is listening to this and they want to take one step to get started on this path of becoming the 2% and not the 98%, what would you have them do?
Well, I mean, I would have them, aside from going to my website and learning how to do it. I mean, there's free stuff there. There's LinkedIn, and there are other people who are trying to change this, flip the conversation, help people flip the conversation. So I'll just say that, like, okay, aside from that, um, go out and have agendaless conversations with two or three of your customers in the next week. Send them a text or an email and say, hey, I would love to, we are constantly trying to make sure that we are aligned with what's going on in our market. And you, as one of our, best customers or whatever, you have insights in your head that we've probably never tapped into. I would love to have a conversation of 15 or 20 minutes with you where we take a step back and I just want to ask you a few questions about your world. And then I'm going to go into listen mode. If you're a CEO or founder, first of all, you may be doing that now, but you may be injecting too much of your own agenda into it. So try to do the mute button and the, quiet mind. But if you aren't having conversations with customers, just go do it. They love it. Customers love to engage about them. Just like all of us in our personal lives, when we meet someone, do we fall in love with them because they just talk about themselves the whole time? I don't think so. We like when people are curious about us. The great American poet Maya Angelou, of course, said, people don't always remember what you told them. They remember how you made them feel. So make your customers feel like you're authentically curious, and you will learn things that can help you rework um, your go to market and maybe even your product in a way that makes more sense to customers and adds more value to them.
So I'm sure that you have met a ton of incredible people who are really leading the way in this space. So, in your opinion, who is leading the charge? Who's changing the way we build relationships with our customers?
Well, someone who I know that you know is named Chad Hornfeld. And he not only is he great at his job, and I've had the privilege of working with him and his team at a former company, and but he's writing the book. I think it's done now or almost done.
I say just this morning I got the advanced reader copy in my inbox, so I'm gonna dive into that today.
Yeah, and I want people to just think about forget the fact that he's in customer success. Forget whether you're in customer success. It is a roadmap from what I've seen to how to engage your customers about them and how to be more strategic, whether you're in sales, C-suite, customer success, account management, consulting. I think it's a book that transcends customer success because and partly I'll say this because it references some of my work, but most importantly, it's about how to remember that you are not your customer. You are not your customer. They are different. So I would say that Chad is leading the way. I can probably think of other people, but I kind of would rather have him take all the oxygen here and get all the glory because I can't think of anyone who's doing it better and has put more effort into putting it together in a way that helps. I hope it helps tens of thousands of people, maybe millions.
Well, you're making me even like double excited to read that advanced reader copy that I received this morning. Bob, tell us more about your business. How do you help people? And if someone's really connecting with you, how can they learn more and what can they expect to find?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm on LinkedIn all the time trying to get my stuff out there. And I post insights that I hope are useful, but I do it in a way that people tell me feels useful and authentic and conversational. And so I would just say I'm not trying to pimp for followers, but you know, I give away a lot of free stuff there. It's around the techniques, tips, tricks on tricks, not to be manipulative, but just insights, how to get customers to talk about what's most important to them. And so what I'm doing in these posts and in my website is revealing something called radically authentic discovery methodology. That methodology is about 25 um, disruptive questions and deep listening techniques and templates and tips that are all wrapped up in this methodology that are basically a playbook for how to position a conversation with a customer that is what I referred to before as a step back conversation about them, what to ask, how to listen, and the listening doesn't matter a darn if they're not talking more. So the questions come
Right.
first, and then the listening, and then how to connect the dots between what their business needs, what they need in their job, and what you deliver. Very simple. The methodology is based on what are now up to nearly 2,900 one-on-one discovery conversations I've done with B2B customers, where I learn, and I get paid to do customer listening tours for companies to help them understand opportunities and gaps in their marketplace. And in doing those many conversations, I learned what questions really get customers to open up and the listening techniques to keep me quiet, that get customers to feel comfortable talking more. So that's what I do. I try to get companies to either embrace the spirit of the methodology and then maybe the skills and tools. And I'm just trying to help more people kind of make that connection. And what I probably should do, and you said this before, like too many companies do it backwards. I want to I'll highlight one company, which is HubSpot. They are actually in the go-to-market business. And I think for a long time that what they started out trying to say, like, marketing is this big wasteful thing. We have a system that can help you be more quantitative and more strategic about it. And at the beginning, marketing people kind of got defensive and said, no, well, they're pretty successful. It's a $45 billion company or something. But they're an example of once you do crack the code on what's important in your market, then you can double down and triple down on it. And that's when you see this enormous growth. I will also tell you, while we're on the subject of HubSpot, their CEO, Brian Halligan, founder, former CEO, wrote an amazing article on the subject of how HubSpot fixed its retention problem. And he went department by department, product, sales, marketing, ops, finance, of what they had to do differently to address their what at the time was a big retention problem. They couldn't even raise money because of this
Wow.
churn. The article doesn't mention the term customer success once as a department. So
No, it's
how
like an ethos, like a mindset almost.
well, it's a mindset, but it addresses this idea that customer success teams today are responsible for churn, yet the causes of churn are widespread.
Yep.
All you have to do is you don't take my word for it, take Brian Halligan's word for it. And I thought he was very everyone should go search for that article and read it, or we put it in the meeting notes if there are call notes here, but
Yeah.
just LinkedIn for Brian Halligan and retention. And it's an important lesson for all businesses that if you want to fix churn, stop only looking at the customer success department and start listening to the customer success department about what they think the root causes of retention issues are. And I think between HubSpot's strong go, and I have no vested interest in them being successful. I'm not a shareholder or a board member. That between them cracking the code on the product market fit and the retention issues, that's why they're almost a $50 billion company.
Well, what a perfect place to leave it. Bob, thank you so much for joining me on the Growth Signal. This was a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, and I think your questions are amazing, and your style is fantastic. So it's
Well,
been.
that is high praise coming from someone whose career it is to listen and ask questions. I gotta admit, I was pretty nervous for this
Well, by the
podcast.
way, I'll please. By the way, my family, my kids, and my wife, my adult children think that it's a big joke that I'm out here talking about listening because I'm terrible at home at listening. So
Well,
we all
it's like the doctor who smokes, right? The dietitian who's
right.
overweight. We put all of our effort into the work, and then at home we have to do what we got to do.
Well, I'd like to think I've gotten a little better at home, but I'll never get credit for it. So I just want to let people know we can all work on something.
We're all working on something. Well, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.